Everybody has a story, and every story needs to be heard. On this podcast, we are talking with each member of the General Conference Leadership Council. I'm your host, Alyssa Truman, and this is ANN Profiles. Today, we have the privilege of talking with Sikhu Daco from Adventist Review Ministries, where she serves as the associate editor. Welcome, Sikhu. Now, just put it out there at the beginning. I know your name is much longer than Sikhu, but I was not going to attempt it.
That's all right.
So tell me, what is your name?
My first name is Sikhululegile. Sikhululegile. Sikhululegile is how I say it. Yes.
I'm going to probably keep calling you Sikhu, but I may
Everyone
start
calls me
practicing
Sikhu.
that for like 5 minutes a day until I can one day surprise you with your actual name.
No. It's all good.
So Sikhu, where are you from?
I'm from Zimbabwe originally. That's where I was born and raised. But then I've lived in the U.S. for the other half of my life. So.
Okay. So let's talk about your childhood, where you were raised. Tell us a little bit about your parents, your family, those early childhood years.
All right. I have two parents, thankfully, mother and father, who now live with me, which is great. But back to childhood. Parents, and I have 4 siblings, 1 brother, 3 sisters. So he is the most amazing man ever because he was raised with sisters.
I'm sure. He's got to be pretty amazing. Now, where do
Yes.
you fall in the lineup if there's 5 of you?
I am number 4 out of 5. I was almost the baby.
And almost the middle child.
Well,
You're not a middle
I'm
child.
not a middle child.
Yeah,
I
you're
think
not.
I identify more with last born, and I have like a lot of the characteristics of last borns because my younger sister came 5 years after I was born.
Okay.
And I was not happy about it. Matter of fact, I did not like her for most of my childhood. It wasn't until I was maybe like 17, maybe 17, 18 that I made peace with the fact that she was here to stay. And
She wasn't going to go away.
And actually it's part of my conversion. Well, it's a whole long conversion experience, but like part
We'll
of
get
that
there.
journey was like God impressing upon my heart the need for me to love my sister, like not just tolerate her. So she came and she usurped my position as the baby. So that's and then the eldest is a girl, my eldest sister, who I absolutely adore and look up to a lot. And then my brother, who abused me physically as a child. I mean, he's only 4 years older than me, but 4 years is significant. So if you're like throwing a kick, if you're throwing like, what are they called? A drop kick?
Sure.
It's gonna impact your little sister who is 4 years younger. So, but I absolutely love him, and that was the way we connected, was by me being stubborn and him threatening, and I would be like, no, you won't, and then he would, and then that's why we are such great friends now. And then my sister, and then me and a younger sister.
It was meant in a joking manner?
No.
Or
He was
just
practicing on me.
practicing on you.
Yeah, he got really good practicing on me.
He got really good practicing on you.
No, he's a great guy. Like, don't get me wrong. I
wanted
love
to make
him.
sure, because someone
Yeah.
listening might think that he was like actually physically.
No, he wasn't physically
abusive to you.
abusive in the sense of like requiring legal action,
Okay.
but he was definitely
A
roughhousing.
brother roughhousing with his sister.
roughhousing with his sister.
Okay.
So legally, he's good. We're good.
Okay, I'm just like, let's just get that taken care of.
Lighthearted, physical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember growing up, my sisters and I would roughhouse with each other, which is funny because I grew up with sisters, but we would kind of roughhouse sometimes, and then we would cry because we were girls, and then tell our parents that the other person was roughhousing. But yeah, I mean, it was very typical growing up. Just this whole. I did not grow up with guys, so I'm imagining it would be
A little intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I feel like it's like fighting among siblings. I feel like it actually like helps foster the bond, like because my brother and I fought so much when we were younger, and it transitioned as we got older. It became, fighting with words. Like we would have these huge, long, polemic, discussions, like, arguing about the meaning of life at the age of 12, and 16. But because we did that when we were younger, like, we are comfortable as adults disagreeing with each other. Like, we're comfortable with dissonance. We're comfortable because I know that just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I don't love you, and doesn't mean you don't love me. Just because you hurt me doesn't mean that it's coming from a place of malice necessarily, So anyways, that to say, like, in learning that in childhood, like with the sibling rivalry, I think it was a healthy thing, like my reflection on it. So.
Well, and I think that's a really intriguing point you bring up, is that our ability to disagree these days seems to predicate us not being able to love each other. And I don't believe that. I can disagree politically, spiritually, whatever, on so many issues with people, and I can deeply love them. And I think it does come from a lot of that early childhood years where I was able to not agree on something and but I was like, but they love me, and I know that they love me. And I feel like we just accidentally ignored completely your middle child, which sounds very typical as a middle child myself. So I want to make sure we give the middle child some like propping up here. So tell me about your middle sister.
I love her to bits. So what I was saying, like with my brother, we fought a lot. With her, we didn't fight a lot because she removed herself from the petty annoyances of these little children.
It's middle children.
That's middle children?
We're
okay.
Good at this. We're good at this.
So really, like, it wasn't a lot of, so she'd see us arguing or fighting about something and she's just like, that's beneath me. Like, she's gone. But I mean, there were a lot of qualities I admire about her. Like, she's a go-getter. Like, if there's anything that she wants, she's going to go and get it. Like, she doesn't think in terms of barriers. She thinks in terms of, like, what is it that I want? She thinks, like, positively about what it is she wants in life, and then she pursues it, which, I mean, I to this day admire and completely adore about her. But yeah, so my middle sister, on the growing up side, was less a part of the landscape, especially as we got a little older, because she was too good for me. And, like, I just wanted to play with her and her friends, and she'd just be like, why are you following me? Like, why don't you get your own friends? And in my mind, I'm like, because your friends are so awesome. Cool. I just want to be with you. So I guess we have like a pretty typical relationship.
That is the hard part for being a younger sibling, though. It really is this, you want to have these experiences with your older sibling. I see this often in my own daughters because I have 3 daughters. I can see my youngest just wants to be included. She just wants to be a part of whatever that is. And the older ones are like, she's younger. Like, I just want to be by myself.
I want to get it.
And but it's that tension's very real. But
no, I was just talking to my son about it actually this morning. Like, I'm like, son, because my eldest son, I was like, you need to, because he's like, oh, why do I have to play with like all the kids at church, like the younger kids who like, it takes so much more effort, playing with them. My words, not exactly his. And so I was talking to him about that because I speak from a place of experience, like experiencing being the one who wants to, and like feeling like you're always left out. And I was like, hey, look, I know it's hard to put yourself out there, for others. And playing with the little kids at church is kind of a sacrifice because you have to like give of yourself, but they appreciate it so much, and just encouraging him, like, it makes such a huge difference for them, that you take the time to play with them, that you're patient with them. And I was like, and think about it, the bigger kids do that for you too. They have condescended, to play with you. So anyways, it's all a learning process. I think God puts us at the right place in birth order for the spiritual lessons that we need, either for that moment or for later in life, maybe for the sake of my children.
Pretty accurate. Yeah. So tell me about your mom and dad.
They're amazing people. They're both educators. My mom was a primary school teacher, which would be elementary school in the States, for all her life. And my dad has done several things where he has landed towards the end of his working career. He's still working. He's a university professor and an administrator. But he studied. He's in the sciences, like more the physics side, geography, la 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 la. So he was a meteorologist for a while, and then he's been teaching applied physics. His PhD is in like seismology. So he's a smart dude, nice guy.
Yeah, you went sciences, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the only thing worse than sciences for me is math. Like, give me like religion, history, like English, all of those, and then he's like, you move into like sciences and math, and I'm like, I can endure it. Anyways, so you were raised in Zimbabwe. Now, were you a Adventist your entire life?
Yes. By the time I was born, both my parents were Adventist. My dad was a convert, as was my mom. Both of them converted to become Seventh-day Adventist. My dad first, and they were high school sweethearts, by the way. And then they broke up. And then he went to college and he became a Seventh-day Adventist through public campus ministry. And then after that, he reconnected with my mom, and he was, thinking about a woman to marry. And he's like, I remember this gal. She was so cool. And so they reconnected and they got married. My mom, though, even though she was an Adventist, she was very, committed. She was a Methodist. And after they got married, she says part of why she married my dad is because he was a religious guy. Like, he didn't smoke, he didn't drink. She didn't want someone who smoked or drank. And she wanted someone who went to church. That was kind of like her non-negotiables. And he fit the bill. But after they got married, because she was, I don't know if I'm telling too much of their story, but after they got married.
It's okay.
Yeah. She was, because she would go to church on Sunday, he started like not going to church as frequently, and she's like, okay, well, I married you because you go to church, and he's like, yeah, but it's hard to like, drag yourself to church, all by yourself. And she's like, okay, well, then come with me. And he's like, I can't because I have to keep the Sabbath. And she's like, what? So in the end, she was like, for his sake, I'll go to church on Saturday. What's the big deal? And then the rest is history. She started studying and she became Seventh-day Adventist. So by the time I was born, they were both in the church, pretty solidly.
So you were raised in the church. Did you do the whole typical Adventist type things? Like, were you in Pathfinders?
I was.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, talk a little bit about what your Pathfinder experience was like.
Oh, it was amazing. Pathfinders with our club was evangelistic. As in, like, on Sundays, we'd be doing drill and marching outside the church. And kids from the neighborhood would see and be like, what is that? Like, because we were in full dress uniform and they'll be like, man, like, what are they doing? And so kids like from the community would join Pathfinders because they were like, it's so cool and we want to be part of this. And, eventually a bunch of them would like start coming to church, and like it was really an awesome experience, like the camaraderie, the spiritual lessons for sure, but from my childhood I especially remember like the hanging out with your friends, but like in an environment that is like safe, so to speak. Yeah.
And now, did you go to Adventist schools?
I went to Adventist school. I think it would count as academy here, for 4 years.
Okay.
Which was has sandwiched my educational experience. So I did like 7 years, which is primary school in Zimbabwe, 7 years at the public school, and then like when I finished, like after grade 7, you take like this national exam, which impacts which schools you'll be eligible to attend depending on how well you score. And I did pretty well. So my mom was like, you could pretty much have your pick of what school you want to go. And my older sister, who was 2 years older than me, she went to a girls' school. And I was like, I will never go to a girls' school. The reason being, probably when I was in 4th or 5th grade, they had this education, I think he was like the education director or something of the conference. He did an afternoon seminar at our church. And he was just talking about education and how it goes and the trends and blah, 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 blah. But the thing that stuck out to me, because we all had to be in the church for the afternoon service. And the thing that stuck out to me of what he said that at that time, I don't know what the stats are right now, but at that time in Zimbabwe, what they were finding was that girls perform well in primary school. But then when they get to secondary school, which is from 8th grade, going up, when they get to secondary school, all of a sudden they're outperformed by boys. And so he was presenting some hypotheses, I guess, like some suggestions for why this is the case. And there were things like, well, some anecdotally people will say, oh, girls shift their focus. Now they're thinking about finding boys because they want to get married. And
because boys aren't apparently thinking about girls.
And then the other reason, which I thought made a little more sense to me as a child and even now at this age, he was talking about social expectations of girls. Because, in my society that I was growing up in, as a girl, you're being prepared for marriage. So once primary school, you're still a child. So yeah, you do stuff around the house. But once you get to that age, like you need to know how to cook, how to clean, how to care for the house. And in essence, you become like a mother in the home as well. So the demands that are placed on girls, starting, from 8th grade going up, become more than what they can handle, like with their academics. And your academic demands increase as well the older you get. So he was like, yeah, so girls tend to do well. And then when they get to 8th grade, they drop off and the boys take off. So in my mind, I was like, I will be the counter argument to that. Like, I was like, I don't care how many chores they give me. I don't care how much work I have to do at home. And I'm not going to talk to no boys. I'm not interested in that. I set my mind like a flint. I was like, I'm going to go, when I hit 8th grade, I'm going to like kill it. And so I was like, there's no way I'm going to girls' school because it'll like destroy my whole point. Like, I just want to show
that you can do this.
That I can be a girl who is doing stuff at home, cooking and cleaning and etc. And I can still perform well, in school. So that's why I didn't want to go to a girls' school. That was a long way to say it.
But okay. It was a very fun ride to get to that conclusion.
Yeah, but then for all the schools I could have gone to, at that point in my life, I had been baptized. I was baptized when I was 10. And so I was like 12, and I felt like I needed some spiritual support. Like I felt like I needed an environment that would nurture me spiritually. So I asked my mom if I could go to the Adventist Academy,
what is it called?
It's now called Bulawayo Adventist High School. It was secondary school at the time, but they added a high school while I was there. So I went to Bulawayo Adventist High School, BAS, which it was because I wanted, I was like, I want to go to an Adventist school and get spiritual support and nurture and grow in my faith with Jesus, which is exactly what happened. It was, everything from like math class. It wasn't just in Bible class where we would talk about faith and Christianity and spirituality. Like, I remember like my math teacher was probably one of the math.
Yay!
Yeah. He was like a really inspirational figure for me. Because as we're doing math, but it was just kind of like, what does even just the exercise of doing the math, like what it teaches you, like the spiritual lessons in it. And he'd just like draw them out. Like he'd be like, you're working on an equation, and in our textbooks we'd have at the back, you have the answer key. But it's just the answer, right? So you still have to go through working through the problem. And then, the temptation would be like, oh man, like to finish homework quickly, you like go find the answer. And then you like figure out a way to get there from what the question is. And so he'd like repeat this often, and it's become like really important, like in my thinking, which has translated, in my practice now, like in Bible study. It's like, it's not just about getting the right answer. Like, there's no cooking in math. Like, you're not just cooking and just putting things in the pot just to try and get the specific answer. It's like you need to go through the right process. And he was like, it's about how you're doing it, not just getting what's at the bottom line, but like the journey matters, right? And like, you know, in Bible study, like that's your hermeneutic. Like you need to have a good hermeneutic because, and he would say this, he's like, because as you go through that practice of like how you're working through the problem, yeah, maybe you'll get the right answer this time, but if you don't have the right methodology, the next time you won't get the right answer, right? So you need to have the right methodology because the methodology matters to getting you to the right answer. And situations will come up where you don't have the answer at the end, right? You don't know what you're supposed to land at. But if you practice going through the right process, if you practice the right methodology, then you're setting yourself up for success later on. Anyway, so I mean, that's one of the lessons. Like, so I loved, I loved my Adventist educational experience. Like, it was foundational. Like, in also like seeing the world through, you know, an Adventist lens and all the different disciplines, you know, from an Adventist perspective. So yes, I went to Adventist school and I loved it.
You're like, and I did. So you graduate from an Adventist high school. Bass. And where do you go from here?
I go to Canada.
Canada.
Yes.
Like, oh, Canada.
Like that one.
Okay. That's a little bit of a continental jump there. Yeah. Also probably a little bit of a weather change.
Well, I went to the West Coast. I was in British Columbia, so as mild of a change as you could get.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's still cold up there.
Yeah. But I mean, BC, and in particular, I was in Victoria, which is considered the Florida of Canada.
The Florida of...
Yeah.
The Florida of Canada.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That actually strikes me as funny how far apart Florida is from Canada. But okay.
But it's kind of like where people go to retire because the weather is like...
Is more pleasant
is milder.
than in other places.
It like snows once a year if it even snows.
What is in British Columbia?
What is in there?
Yeah.
What
beauty?
Is there?
Besides
why
beauty.
I went there.
Yeah. It's like, I just went there because it was pretty.
I know.
Happened to go to college at the same time.
Love to. So in the Zimbabwean system, like we have 13 grades, not 12. So you go to, after grade 7, you do like a huge national exam. Grade 2, then 2 years later, which would be 9th grade, you do another national exam. And that it's pretty much like a streaming, like they like, you know, streamlining and putting you in your place, I guess. So
determining what you are good at.
Determining your future. Anyways, okay. I'm not a fan, but so
not a fan of it, but okay.
Not particularly. So 9th grade, you do another national exam, and then 2 years later, what would be 11th grade, I guess, is for us it's Form 4, so like 8, 9, 10, 11 it's like a block. That's secondary school. And 11th grade you do another huge national exam. So back in the day, like after that one, it would kind of like high school in America, where you finish high school and you could get a job. But as is the trend in America, it became like you can't get a job after 11th grade. There are 2 additional years of what we call high school then, which is 12 and 13. And that one is even more streamlined. So generally, like you're kind of like in the sciences-ish, but you still have like English studies, like when you're in 10 and 11. But after 11, you take this national exam, and that streams you for, are you going to go into the sciences? Are you going into the arts? Are you going into, you know, like what area you're going into?
So which shoot did you end up in?
So I ended up in the sciences.
Okay.
Of course.
We would have been friends, but not because we were in the same class.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. I have friends who are not in the sciences now.
Now?
Yeah. But yeah, so I was doing math biochem, but I had always wanted to travel because my dad used to travel. When he was a meteorologist, he would travel for like conferences. He studied abroad, like all these things. And I was just kind of like, dude, I would love to study in a different country, you know, and have a different experience. I just always wanted that. So when I finished Form 4, 11th grade, one of my teachers, after we got our results, he contacted me and he said, hey, you performed well enough to qualify for the scholarship I just learned about for United World Colleges. At the time, there were there 9 or 10 at the time. There are way more now, in different countries all over the world. And this type of school, the purpose of it was to bring young people from all over the world together to study together for 2 years. And the purpose of it was to foster international understanding. So this type of school started after the Cold War, and they were trying to think, like, how do we avoid going into this kind of thing again? If we indoctrinate them, the brilliant minds in the world when they're young, to have a global view of the world, like, rather than thinking, just for what is good for my own country, but to think more broadly, like in seeing the world and being global citizens, then maybe we can approach, better diplomacy, better international relations. So that was the purpose of the school. And he invited me to apply, and I did apply, and I got in by a miracle of grace. And so that's how they assigned me to go to the one in Canada. And so that's how I ended up.
So you don't get to pick necessarily.
It depends. So so in Zimbabwe, it was a full scholarship. So like my airfare there, like my stay there, like everything. So they selected, how many students that year? I think it was 4 students that year.
From all of Zimbabwe?
Mm-hmm. Wow. And then they assigned us which country we would go and where we would represent our country. In essence, like, you're representative of your country at the school. And they picked Canada for me. For now, United World Colleges, like, you can apply. You don't have to go through a national committee and go through like the kind of process that I went through. So it's not in every case that people are assigned, but in my case, yes,
you were. I
was assigned to Canada.
So you were in British Columbia, and you're doing biochem?
I was doing, at United World Colleges, you do an international baccalaureate diploma. So you have like 3 higher subjects, 3 standard level subjects. My highest subjects were the sciences, with math, biochem, because that's what I was going to do in Zimbabwe initially. And then I did French. I remember French because I loved it. Like, I did like 3 French, English, and like, I don't remember, like, we had TOK, like theory of knowledge, which was kind of like, and philosophy. I actually did philosophy and TOK, which was my introduction to philosophy, which I absolutely love now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're going to this really incredible sounding college.
It was pretty awesome.
How is your faith during this time?
Good question. How did you know to ask that? Okay.
I don't know.
Like I said, I was baptized when I was 10. I wanted to be baptized since I was like 7. I really wanted to be baptized. I studied the doctrines. It wasn't just like, that'd be cool. Like, I think I wanted to follow Jesus with all my heart. And when I left to go to Canada, in reflecting on it now, is that, you're removed from all of the social cues that you're accustomed to. So growing up, my life revolved around, I'd go school, church, home. Like, that was it. School, church, home, that's it. And then, like, you're removed from that in a completely new environment. All the social cues are gone. There's like no accountability to whatever values that you had. So it was a real test of character, I guess, a test of faith, a test of like what I valued. And so my first year, I like did the most. I did it all. Like, academics was not my number one focus.
Fair.
I mean, there were all these cultural experiences, people from like all over the world, and like they would have like, dance troops, like, Ukrainian dance, and then like learning to salsa, and I loved dancing, and like tried all the different types, that were available on campus.
Did you try a polka?
Who?
A polka?
Was not available on campus. What is it?
I think it's Polish.
No, we
if
do
you're
not have the
listening
Polish
and
dance.
you're Polish and polka is not Polish, I'm very sorry. I don't know. I've just heard of a polka.
Oh,
It's like,
really?
maybe German? I don't even know.
We did
It's
not
from
have
Europe.
it. Oh, okay.
It's from Europe.
The European one, so Ukrainian dance was like a huge production on campus.
Really?
It was like 50 students and like huge choreography, and it was just, I was like, I'm gonna do Ukrainian dance. Like, anyway,
I
so
really
don't-
wish that we could somehow get the cameras to like focus over there in the corner of our studios and have you like demonstrate some
no,
Ukrainian
no,
dance.
no, no, no.
But the cameras can't turn. So
Good.
otherwise I would totally do this. But it's just because of the cameras.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
anyways,
no.
so you tried all the things.
I tried all the things, and I got involved in all the things. So like I said, yeah, I did like the hiking and like all the like outdoor experience, but it was like not my cup of tea. Like, why would I leave a comfortable bed? It didn't like logically make sense to me. Like, why?
I ask myself this question often.
Yeah, like, no, it makes no sense. So no, like, I did what I had to do of wilderness. You know, like we did like rock climbing. Like that was fun. You know, adrenaline rush of like rappelling down and like, okay, yeah. Anyways, a huge part of my life though was the dancing, and a lot of times, like when you're a student, like dance parties happen like on Friday nights because end of the week, let loose and like enjoy yourself. And so Friday night happens to be the beginning of Sabbath. So
Oh, thank you for letting me know. I'm
yeah,
gonna write that down.
Yeah. So, sunset on Friday.
Okay. Thank you. I was a little. All right. So
Yeah.
so you're running into your first
So,
challenge. You found
yeah.
something you love, but now it's this tension between what you
Yeah.
were raised with and what you're loving.
It wasn't a tension in my first year. It was really easy in my first year. It was just,
Okay.
it's what I do. And then my second year, when I left home, my mom gave me 2 Spirit of Prophecy books. She gave me The Great Controversy and she gave me Steps to Christ. I grew up in the church. I absolutely loved the Lord. I did. It was very genuine, but I never read Spirit of Prophecy. And why? Because the covers were not appealing to me.
My husband's a graphic designer. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm very visual. It's like,
Yeah,
the book looks really
yeah.
bad.
Just
I
look
don't
like-
know. I'm with you.
And like my you know, home was like, you need to read these books. They're so good. And I was like, but now my second year, I'm like so homesick. And I remember these books because these books represent my mother's love for me. You know, it's something that she gave to me before I left. And so I started by reading Steps to Christ because it was thinner, not as huge of a commitment. And I remember like I was sitting in a bus and it was a bunch of us students and we were coming back from town. I brought the book with me to read on the bus and we're driving back and I'm reading this book and there's this chapter where she talks about how our promises are like ropes of sand. You know, and like our best efforts, our best laid plans, like we want to serve God, but like everything that we try, like we fail. I started bawling. I'm like reading this stuff. I'm like, how does she know exactly what I'm going through? Like, it's like she was reading my heart word for word. And I'm like, but she's dead, you know? And like,
Because she experienced a lot of the same things that we did.
And it was not that I had not had an encounter with the Holy Spirit before. I believe that, of course, he was leading me throughout my Christian experience up to that point. But it was the first time that through the printed page, I was reading something and the Holy Spirit brought it to me with conviction. You know, it wasn't someone preaching up front or like whatever. It wasn't somebody that I knew speaking to me. It was like God could speak to me through the printed page, you know? Anyway, so I'm like, embarrassed because I'm like crying. I'm having this like huge spiritual epiphany on this bus with all of my classmates. But we get to campus, and after I finished reading Steps to Christ, I had this other book by the same author. So for the first time, I crack open The Great Controversy to read it. I had cracked it open before. And I tried reading from the beginning, and it was just like, I couldn't get into it, you know? So this time I was like, you know what? I just cracked it open. I was like, I'm just going to start reading wherever I open.
That's a really unique way to start the great controversy.
Yeah, because I had tried and failed, So
try something new.
Yeah, why not?
I love it.
What's it gonna hurt, right? So I flipped probably like to around like John Hus, that section. Yeah. And I start reading and I couldn't stop. So I read all the way to the end and come back to the beginning and start from the beginning and read all the way through to the end again. And I just had this revival experience. Like
Why?
It was...
Because I hear a lot of people like saying that the book doesn't matter anymore. Like it's the past. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What on earth would compel a young woman to have a revival experience from the Great Controversy?
What struck me was what these people were willing to die for. I was like, dude, like, what am I willing to die for? Especially like when I hit Luther, and like it blew my mind how simple the truth was that he laid his life on the line for. Like the fact that Jesus is the one who forgives us of our sins. Not some person like that we can have direct access to the throne of God through Jesus. That was it. And I was like, I grew up with this. Like, this is like so simple. This is Christianity 101. I'm like, but somebody had to sacrifice so much for this truth, Like, this was so precious to him. And that's really what struck me. And I just started thinking about all the truths that I grew up with. I was well versed like in Bible prophecy and like all of this stuff. So the prophecy stuff wasn't new to me. Like I grew up hearing that stuff. We would always have evangelistic series once a quarter, and they would go through the prophecies. And so I was well versed in the stuff, but the simple truths that people were willing to lay down their lives for, like that's what really got me.
I remember, I think I read The Great Controversy for the first time at 15 or 16. And actually, interestingly enough, it was Huss and Jerome that captured my attention the most. And it was that one recanted, and then they saw the other like stand true. And then that brought them back to like, no, I'm going to recant my recantation, And I was so inspired by it because you see these people who they're both trying to live these godly lives, and how I was easy to turn until we saw other people holding to truth. And when we see other people holding to truth, it can still propel our hearts, even if we've made the mistake, to come back to the truth. And I just, Huss and Jerome were like some of my favorites. So it's interesting when you said Huss, I was like, oh, yeah, he was like my guy too.
No, I mean, it was reading The Great Controversy challenged me to, it was a question of, do I value the truths that I've grown up with? And I had to think, like, do I believe this stuff? And if I believe it, like, do I value it? Because if I believe it, you can't in sincerity believe it and not value it, because it's so mind-blowing what you believe. You believe that the God of the universe, who created all things, condescended into human form and died on a cross. I mean, like, what we believe is so compelling that you can't truly believe it and it doesn't impact you, So it caused me to confront the truths that I grew up knowing and that I did believe, but I guess in the recent years of my life was not living in a way that reflected those beliefs.
How does this shift everything? Because you cannot read this, and I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it in your eyes. You do not read this and become unchanged.
Yeah, I mean, changed everything.
Where does that take you with your schooling? How does this impact how you're interacting with others?
Well, for the immediate thing that it did. So firstly, we had this huge production that our school would do for our donors, because everyone was there on scholarship. So we had a lot of donors giving. And in this production, probably 70% of it were dances, cultural dances from different countries. Some with song and dance, yeah. So about 70 would include dances. And I was that year, I was in more than 50% of the show. And the show was Friday night, Sabbath morning. No. Friday night, Sabbath afternoon, and then Saturday night. I'm reading this and I was like, I can't be in the show, you know? It took a lot of work to get, you know, to be in that many pieces, you know, of the show was like, it took a lot of effort. And it also took away from other people who wanted to be in the show and their skits didn't make it, you know? So I felt like it was a hard decision to make, but I was just like, I won't even die because of this, you know? But like, it feels like a huge sacrifice, but like, you know, and that was the first step for me. I remember, there was this family at the church that I attended, Peter and Karen Berman. They were my parents away from home. They took me under their wing. They would pick me up for church, like anything I needed spiritually. They were my parents, really. They were there for me. And I remember out of the blue, like he calls me. Like he wouldn't call me all the time, but he just calls me in the middle of the week as I was wrestling through this. I think God put on his heart to call me. And I explained to him, I'm like, I don't know what to do. And he said, I think you know what to do. I was like, no, I don't. He's like, yes, you know what to do. I'll be praying for you. And like, he hangs up. I'm like, you know. Anyway, so I pulled out and it caused this huge hullabaloo on campus. But I saw like my friends came like to my defense and they're like, hey, this is her Sabbath. You know, they don't keep Sabbath. Like, this is her Sabbath. This is important to her. Like, get off her back, you know? And at the end of, you know, of my time at that UWC, the, how do you call him? Principal? Headmaster? He wrote, because they would write out in our reports. And, like, what he wrote in my report, he was like, you know, Sikhu is a principled person who stands up for what she believes no matter what the consequences are. Wow. And, like, I mean, I cried when I read it because I was like, I'm not. But this is what the testimony that God can make out of my life if I will surrender to him, you know? So God used that challenge, you know, that situation to be a witness to somebody else, you know, not because I'm great, because obviously I was not super Adventist. But even in that experience of repenting and coming to him and, you know, deciding to change my behavior in that moment, not just be like, well, I already made these decisions, it's going to harm too many people, but just being like, I have to be true to what I know and what I believe to be truth. I like go with the conviction. You know, God uses it. And I believe that because like God helped me to make that decision, which made making the next decisions not easier, but it's like a step in that direction. You're talking about like how it changes the trajectory of my life. When I'm flying to Wellesley College, which is where I went after Pearson, which is the UWC in Canada. I remember I was journaling, and I have the journal like, and I was writing. I'm just like, you know what? God is sending me to Wellesley as a Waldensian. Like, his purpose for me there, like, is to minister for him, like to reach out to people. Like, and I started praying. I know I started praying because I have it journaled, like at least on my flight to Wellesley, like that God would make me a missionary on campus. Like, I'm not just there to go to school and excel and whatever. I'm there to, you know, tell people about Jesus, you know. And it's interesting that after, like, leading to that, by the time I get there, God has already been preparing the ground in the Boston area because there are students who are doing public campus ministry. And I get connected with them, and it really does impact the way that I do school for the next 4 years, which incidentally was a women's college, which I'd said I'd never go to women's college, but that's how God led me. You know?
See, Wellesley is a pretty amazing college. I mean, it's not like a...
It's not a girls' school. It's a women's college.
There you go. But Wellesley it's a very prestigious school. So you've moved from a rather prestigious global kind of a view school. Now you've moved to Wellesley. What are you pursuing while you're at Wellesley? What degree?
I was pre-med, just like every good immigrant ought to be.
Okay, I did not know that this is a common factor here. Immigrants.
Yeah.
So you're there for all 4 years.
I was there for all 4 years. So my majors were biochemistry and French. Biochemistry of necessity because I was pre-med, and biochemistry covered most of the prereqs for pre-med. And then French for fun because I got to study philosophy in French, and I had been forbidden by my brother to do philosophy as a major. So that was kind of a workaround.
All right. So were there any experiences while you were there that just stand out that you want to make sure that you share with me?
Oh,
while we drink our cups of water.
Too many. I mean, that is like so broad.
I know. I'm trying to like figure out because I'm like, okay, trying to look at the time. Like I want to make sure we get all of your life because I feel like that you could be like 3 or 4 episodes here. This is one just because it was so much fun to talk to you. What during your time there connects you to your next stage the most?
Okay.
There we go. We'll do that. I was gonna narrow it down for you.
Narrow it down. Public campus ministry. So while I was at Wellesley, like I said, on my way there, God already put the burden on my heart that you're not at your school just to do school, that there are people here that you need to minister to. And then when I got there, I got introduced with students at other universities in the Boston area they would have Bible study on Friday nights. And that's how I met Justin Kim, actually. He was leading out the Bible study.
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
Listen to the ANN Profiles episode with Justin Kim, and you'll hear his part of where this story is. Okay, so you become a part of this Bible study group.
Yeah, and it's students from Harvard, later on from MIT, from Boston University, BC, Boston College. Justin was at Brandeis, but he had graduated. And we're studying the Bible together and then go on our campuses and try to do ministry as God leads. My second year, so we invited, there's a campus ministry, a department for campus ministry in Michigan. And so we invited, they had missionaries, young people who would do ministry on university campuses. And they had missionaries there, and we invited them to come and visit us in Boston to like help strengthen each other, get ideas from them. And then like we had special projects for that week that they visited us to do on our campuses. And I remember, it was the first Sabbath. Yeah, it was the second Sabbath. This is why. It was the second Sabbath that they were there. Divine service, Sebastian Braxton is speaking. Now, mind you, we had been interacting.
I'm seeing all these connections just coming together, and I'm understanding so much of like inverse Sabbath school and all of this now from here.
Our roots in studying the Bible together go way back. But like we had, mind you, we'd been interacting with these guys for a whole week. So you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? You've seen like these dudes, these supposed missionaries, like, when you think missionaries, you're like, they're so holy and, they're so godly and they study the word of God. Like, I guess kind of how sometimes people think of GC, employees. Yeah. Yes. But yeah, we totally had that picture of like the missionaries. And then you're hanging out with them for a week and it's like they lose their tempers.
You mean they're human?
Yeah. And I was like, what? And very human at that point, right? And then on Sabbath, Sebastian's preaching, I do not remember what the message was, but it was hitting, man. Like, it was like all the feels. And I'm like bawling because I'm emotional. We're all emotional, but I let my emotions show.
Some of us are a little more emotional. It's okay. We would definitely have a fun podcast because I think if we had ongoing stuff, we'd both be bawling all the time. Yes.
But I'm like, and then what struck me about that though, I was like, this guy is like not the kind of person that I would think would preach a sermon and I would be crying. Because what I've seen of him, I'm not saying he's a bad person. I love you, Sebastian. He's heard me share this before, but
I'm definitely going to make sure he gets this episode. Okay.
But it was that as human as he is, like with all the weaknesses that I've seen, like God can use him to impact me. And I was like, that means God can use me to impact somebody, you know? And coming out of that experience with those missionaries, I sensed God calling me to devote a year to be a missionary, which I did not, because all of the counsel that I received, particularly from, you know, those that I respected, said, do not do it because you're on scholarship. You might lose your scholarship, da, 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 da. In retrospect, I should have done it because the next year I got in a relationship that was the worst idea that we're not going to talk about.
And you told me the one off-topic limit was exes, so I wasn't even going there.
Yeah, the one we're not going to talk about. Bad decision. Like, the right decision would have been to follow the impulse that God put on my heart. The wrong decision was what I ended up doing instead. Which every time that I have not listened to God, I've ended up like in a shady relationship. The first UIC, anecdotally, I was invited to go.
For this.
The first UIC was my first year at Wellesley, and we were hanging out with like the people who were like some of the people who were planning the GYC, and they're like, "Hey, let's go to this. It's gonna be a young people's conference." And I was like, "Nah." So I went to Canada instead, and ended up in a mess of a relationship again. And then, you know, God called me to go to campus, and I was like, okay, I want to go. No, it's not a good idea. And then I ended up in a mess of a relationship. So we should follow God.
Or you'll end up in a mess of a relationship.
In a mess of a relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Noted.
Yes. So
I'm married, so I'm pretty sure I can get out of that whole mess of a relationship thing. But I'll still try to follow God
Yes, please, because we'll make a mess of our relationships.
Of our current relationships. Okay.
All right. So after when I was graduating, I wanted to work, and I got a call, hey, come to campus, be a missionary, which the first time no one had called me. It was just, I had that impression. Mm-hmm. But this time I got a call like, hey, come to campus. And I'm like...
Campus is what?
Which was the missionary training program that was being run in Michigan.
Okay.
And I had applied for my dream job. I was a French and biochemistry double major. This job was and in my senior year, I had studied bioinformatics and using like computer modeling.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I like glazed over. Like we're using like computer
modeling.
It. Like we're using like what was cutting edge technology then, but like you modeling biochemical reactions, so the way that things like interact with each other, using computer modeling, and with a specific application for HIV/AIDS research, specifically in sub-Saharan Africa, which is where I'm from. But a lot of the collaborators on the project were from French-speaking countries, and the team needed someone interested in bioinformatics with a biochemistry background who could speak French. And I was from sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, it was like tied up with a bow, it seemed, which I got the job. But God called me to go to campus. A whole nother story there. Like, he made it absolutely clear this is where he was calling me to. Immense sacrifices, you know, financial sacrifices. It was challenging, you know, family-wise. I mean, it meant a whole lot of things, but that's like another, like, I guess, you know, pivot point, which was like God clearly like changing the trajectory of my life, you know. That's where it changed from going to medical school, you know, or doing, you know, an MD, PhD, like completely shifted. And I was doing public campus ministry I did the missionary training program. Then they invited me to stay on to work on the university campuses with the students. So I did that from 2006 until 2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were there for a while working on it.
Yep.
At some point, I know you end up at Andrews.
2013.
2013. Mm-hmm. So you are called to increase your knowledge in other areas than biochem and French. And you go to the seminary at Andrews University and pursue a
master's in religion, emphasis in systematic theology. Yes.
Tell me about Tell me about your time there. What does that time there do for you personally?
Mm-hmm.
And how does that keep you even more connected to the church?
You have great questions.
Justin said that too.
Yeah.
He was like, I feel like I'm at a therapist.
Oh, search my soul. I went to Andrews for this program because, like I was kind of like at that itchy point. You kind of like get that point in your life where you're like, I want something more, And when I read the description of the program, specifically the Master's in Religion, emphasis in systematic theology, I was like, this is it. It was the closest thing to like doing philosophy, except like in the Bible, And like, it looked so interesting. And the kind of classes that you'd be doing, like, and it did not disappoint. Like, my experience was what I went there for. It was amazing. Just sitting at the feet of like, of these theological brains.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
I'm working on my master's right now, so I get to sit in and listen. And you're right. It's just like, oh
yeah. And
it's amazing because you feel like you're just absorbing so much knowledge, and you're just like, how did I make it this far in my life without having this knowledge? And you just grow.
Yeah, no, it was great. Like a lot of because I had been in ministry for several years, I had like and the awesome thing in Michigan, they would have ministerial training for the new pastors, and they would let me come and sit in their ministerial training. So I had learned a lot, like in terms of like practical field experience, just that was awesome in and of itself. And then like to couple it with like a firm like theological like backbone, it was awesome. In terms of personal benefit, I cannot neglect to mention that I met my husband there, which has been a great personal benefit. Yeah, which has been a great personal benefit. When I was going to go to Andrews, my friends were laughing. They're like, ha, you're going to get married. Because I mentioned we're not going to talk about exes because I had sworn off of the whole marriage thing. Like, I was like, not happening for me. It took a lot of time for me to heal. And just as I was getting to like healing place, I was just like, well, I'm fine. I don't think all men are dogs anymore because we can equally be bad, right? I was like, but I'm working for you, Lord, and I think we're okay. Like, I can grow spiritually, just me and you. Like, I don't need to get married. I'm fine not getting married. There's so much more I can do if I'm not married. I can up and go whenever, which I was doing. Like, it was awesome. And I wasn't trying to ruin it by getting married. So my friends I called it a threat. They were threatening me with, oh, you want to go to Andrews? You're going to get married. And I'm like, I will not get married. I am not going there for that.
When did you meet him?
I met him my first year, second semester.
Didn't take long. Were you married before you left with your degree or right after?
Right after.
Yeah, okay. That's kind of what I assumed was happening here.
Yeah.
What is his name?
His name is Archie.
What does
Daco.
he do?
He's into insurance right now. He's a jack of many, many trades. He's very, very gifted and talented. Like, I did not, so I wasn't going to get married anyways.
Right.
And then from back in the day, even when I did want to get married, like, he is not what was on my list from even way back then. But I didn't know that I would appreciate having someone in my life who is good at so many things. Like, anything breaks in the house, for the most part, he can fix it. What he cannot do is electrical.
You're like, there's this one thing.
Yeah, and his plumbing is iffy, right? Like, as in, like, he's never attempted it because he's never studied it. But he does like all the HVAC stuff, like chopping the trees down and fixing car. I mean, like,
I believe God gives us, if we are open to it, the person we need, not necessarily the person we want. My husband is not the person. Like, I had this. I was going to marry a person who is basically in the ministry who looked like a model. I was pretty sure this was exactly what God was going to give me. And we were going to do ministry together and and I realize now God knew that I needed someone who loved his church, who loved mission, but who was steady. Mm-hmm. My husband is so steady. He's my rock. I can be I'm out there. I'm like, I have all these visions and ideas, and it's just my brain is working in 1,000 directions. And my husband is this steady rock that is immovable, and in the best way. And I know that when I need that consistency, that anchor in my life, that he is there. Mm-hmm. He is not whom I would have picked, but he is exactly who God knew I needed. And I was fortunately open to having listened to God on what I needed and not necessarily what I just thought was the perfect fit for me.
I mean, it's exactly what you said. Like, and it wasn't until, so I met Archie the first Sabbath of the second semester that I was at Andrews. That first semester, God put it on my heart to start praying about the marriage thing. My mom told us, like, probably when we were like 12 or 13, you need to start praying for your husband. It didn't make sense to me. Even then, I'm like, I'm 12 years old. Like, what am I going to say? So, like, I'll try sometimes, like, dear Lord, I don't know where he is. Like, in China, maybe. Like, I don't know. Like, what am I supposed to say? Keep him safe? And I'm like, once in a blue moon.
Help him be good.
I don't know. I'm like, I need to pray for myself. I need to pray for some random dude I haven't met. But anyway,
it was always an awkward prayer because I was told that too, and I tried to pray. I'm like, help him to be good and behave his parents and love you.
I'm like, all right.
I'm not discounting praying.
Yeah, no.
At that age, it is. It's just like I don't know what
some people are called to that, and some people are. It wasn't me.
Fair.
Yeah, but when God did put it on my heart, and for me, it had to be God being like, hey, you need to pray, like, consider the possibility, because that's where I was at. I'm just like, not even on the radar, like, because I had plans all the way to 40. And I'm like, okay, at 40, we'll reevaluate what we're doing. Like, maybe then I might consider, And it was God being like, are you willing to do this if I was calling you to it? And I'm like, no, because you would never do that to me, So it was a lot of conversation that needed to happen to get to the place of, like you were saying, the willingness to even be like, okay, Lord, well, if in the off chance that maybe, and so Archie had to go through me praying through a lot of stuff too, even after we met. So, but anyways, I agree with you. God gives you the things that you need, and Archie has been what I have needed. And I've thought about several times, like, where I am in terms of ministry, like, in my life, Archie is a big part of that. Yep. Like, the choices that I've made, the places where I've ended up, the doors that I've opened or shut, like, he is a huge part of that, and I'm so thankful that God brought him into my life.
I think we need to give a huge shout out to husbands who support their women as they serve the church, who are there and they're faithful, because we wouldn't be who we are and where we are without them. So you're at Andrews. Yes. You marry this handsome man. I don't know if I've actually met Archie. Now I need to meet Archie.
Yeah, every time I mention you, I'm like, oh yeah, Alyssa. He's like, who? I'm like, communications, transwise.
We're gonna have to have like a big get together between Adventist Review and communication, like big picnic or something. I don't know. Or, anyway, so where do we go from here? So you get out of the seminary.
And I'm a woman with a master's in religion, and it's like, what do I do? Go be a chaplain? And the public campus ministry called me back, and they were like, hey, you're on the market, because at the time they had these ideas for like building on their resources, And so it was going to be like a really good match, you know, with the background, with the educational background that I had, plus the experience like in public campus ministry, marrying those together to actually help produce resources that we could export and help other ministries, you know, in doing their work. So I went back to campus, and then while I was there, Justin got a call to come to work in Sabbath school.
Justin Kim.
Got a call to come work
General Conference,
to the General
Sabbath
Conference,
School,
Sabbath School,
Personal
Ministry Department.
I love that. We're just going to like echo each other now.
Yeah.
And he specifically was working on
Inverse,
Okay.
which is a Bible study guide for young adults. And
You sound like you went to sales mode.
I
right
know,
there.
I did. Shameless plug. And so
Check
after
them out on
here-
Hope Channel. They also
Yes,
have
yeah.
a weekly program.
a weekly program that you can watch online on YouTube or Hope Channel. For the Bible study guide, go to inversebible.org. So, he came, and he had been here for a while, and then he calls, and he's like, "Hey, so I know you just bought a house,
Ouch.
and I know you just had a baby. You had a baby, and yeah, but would you be interested? We have an opening, and would this be something that interested you?" It was like exactly what I was going to be doing for campus, except just focused on that, like developing resources for young adults, you know, and with the vision that was developing around Inverse was like really creating a resource that would help young adults get into the Bible for themselves, which is a huge burden for me. Not just hearing a sermon, listening to our favorite preachers, but learning how to study for ourselves so that we're not getting caught with every wind of doctrine, but having the tools to know how to go through scripture and parse it for yourself. And this is exactly what they were going to be doing. And he's like, think about it. And here's the crazy thing. Okay, I don't know if I say this, but okay, I'm going to say it. But here's the crazy thing. So before this, I was invited to be part of the Revival and Reformation Committee. This is after I had graduated from Andrews. And I accepted the invitation. So my husband and I come to Maryland for my first meeting. We're driving through Silver Spring. And this thought pops in my head, like, would you live here? And I was like, no. It's so congested. I'm in Michigan. You got like wide open spaces, man. Like it's awesome. Like it's so congested. You're always hearing sirens. And I actually verbalized it to Archie. I was like, we wouldn't live here, would we? He's like, no way. Like, no. And then like, so that was that one time. The next time I come back for a committee meeting, I'm walking through the GC building. And like this thought pops in my head, would you work here? And I was like, okay, now that's just pride talking. Like, what in the world makes you think puny little you would ever, like, I'm not even talking like right now. I'm talking like in your lifetime, after all of the work experience you could ever possibly have, would ever work in this place. And I'm walking through the hallway. It was on second floor. And I remember looking down and you can see like the whole globe and like, and I was like, Lord, no, like there's no way that I would ever work here. Not as in I don't want to per se, but just like there's no way that would ever happen.
I'm not worthy of it. It doesn't make any sense like on paper.
This is like a, and then Justin calls me, right? And when he did call and I started praying about it, those instances came back to mind, just being like, would you be willing, you know? And I was like, this would be nuts. This would be crazy, you know, and we had to figure out what to do with our house. And Archie had to uproot himself. He was finishing up prerequisites for his doctor of physical therapy. So he didn't even actually start the program. That's why he's got so many skills. So he actually was doing like an what you call them, apprenticeship.
Okay.
And so he has all these like DPT skills. He didn't actually go through the program, but like I get to benefit from his DPT skills. But
he should have gone into like massage. I'm just saying that would have been very beneficial.
No, but I still benefit from massage.
Okay, well, there you
go. Amen. So, yeah. So, so the call came, and I saw in it and see in it God's call. I think if it was just Justin Kim who had called me, I'd be like, yeah, because we know each other forever, you know? And it's like, you're just trying to reach to like the people that you know. And like, I probably would have discounted it also with the feeling of inadequacy, like to such a high calling to work in this, you know, in the building that serves the world church. And, but the fact that God had put on my heart before.
He prepped you.
Yeah, he prepped me for it. And like, I'll go to like my pre-prep. And this is the last thing on like coming to work here. When I was a missionary, when I did the missionary training program for public campus ministry, I was probably like the worst missionary. So I always say they invited me to stay on because I failed the first year. And they're like,
oh no,
stay on so we can try to fix you. But like, you know, you had to give Bible studies. I had 0 Bible studies. You know, my small group was like falling apart. Like I was, by all the statistics of like a great missionary, I was not. And I remember like I was struggling with God, wrestling with God about this. Like, why'd you call me here if you're going to make a failure out of me? Like, why would I had to, you know, not that what I had to give up was so great, but like it took effort, you know, to be in this place, you know, you bring me this far just to leave me. And then what God put on my heart, like, it's crazy what he put on my heart. He put on my heart a prayer for more influence. Like, when I think about it now, I'm like, that's nuts. So I remember, like, I was praying, and I was just like, God, give me greater influence. And I was like, why would I? But I'm, like, so horrible. I'm so horrible at everything I do. Like, what am I going to teach people? How to not give Bible studies? How to fail?
How to fail with grace.
With grace. But I prayed that. I was like, God, you know, maybe it's just if I can just be faithful in my personal life, and if you can put my life on a platform that faithfulness can become the testimony. Because I'm obviously not good at like knocking on the door and getting a Bible study. I'm obviously not good at like doing surveys and getting Bible studies. But like maybe I can succeed at being faithful to you. And then you use that, like use that as influence to influence people for the gospel. Shortly after that, I was invited to be on the leadership for GYC. And then like when I got this call to come work, you know, for the Sabbath school department in the GC building, I was just like, Lord, like you are widening my influence, not my influence, but you're giving me a platform where if I can just be faithful to you, you can use this to impact somebody, you know? And so that's just really been my prayer. I'm just like, help me to just be help me to be kind to my children. This is my ministry. It's like, God, help me to be kind to my children. Help me to be patient in my marriage. You know, just the personal life, in my personal interactions, like with my coworkers. Help me to be faithful in all those things, and then use that, like from this platform that I stand, somehow like translate that into impacting people. You know,
Sikhu, you and I've talked some. We, as Adventist Review and GC Communication, are trying to seek to collaborate in more and more ways. You and I have gotten to know each other a lot better. You knew my husband before you really knew me. I could not be more excited to know that you are serving at Adventist Review Ministries at this time in Earth's history. Seeing all the ways that God has led you, the experiences that you've had that are not typical for many Adventists who've grown up in the Adventist system. We've done, you know, the very Adventist things, which I'm one of them, so I'm definitely not faulting this, right? But as you seek to put content into Adventist Review to help members fall deeply in love with God. Most of our young people do not go to school on Adventist campuses. Most of our members have struggled with all the same things that you've struggled with. You are uniquely positioned to be able to bring clarity and purpose to the mission God has called us to as a church. I'm beyond grateful that when God allowed the door to open multiple times in your life, that you were willing to pivot and go through the door. And I just want to say thank you. I want to thank you for your vulnerability, your boundless energy and excitement. You are fun to talk to.
As are you, by the way.
But thank you for accepting God's call, for being willing to give up, being able to rethink what you maybe thought, so that you were open when He actually called you. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for joining all of us today and for sharing your heart and being authentically Sikhu. Sikhu Manunu, as Justin would say there. So thank you for coming.
It's been my pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of A&N Profiles with our guest, Sikhu. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to our podcast or YouTube channel wherever you're tuning in today, because we don't want you to miss any future episodes. Thanks for spending this time with us, and join us next week as I continue to get to know the life stories of more very inspiring people.